Welcome, everyone. It's about that time for the You Are That Which You Seek meditation and discussion group. Welcome, guys. A lovely group as usual. Feel free to leave your cameras off or turn them on, whichever you like. Yay, hi, Paul. Yay, John, Kat. Dawn's here. Brenda, cool. Good to see you. Um, Talea, awesome. Wonderful people. Okay, so the theme for today's meditation is frightening emotions. So it can be helpful to look at emotions a little bit more deeply, a little bit more directly because those are often our indicators for the decisions we make and the actions we take. And with that being said, this is, as our meditations usually are, a kind of undermining, a kind of second look or an undermining of emotions and their meaning for us. But with that being said, this doesn't go to say that our emotions should be ignored or not looked into conceptually, because that is a very important approach as well. But for the purpose of being able to really look at those emotions more objectively and self-reflect, it can be helpful to minimize what they mean to us. So in our meditation today, again, the theme is going to be frightening emotions. But it can be anything that's intense to us. Of course, if there's something intense and we have a problem moving past that point, a difficulty moving past that point, it's because that emotion, that intensity, means something to us. And so we're going to experiment with, rather than referring to the meaning of that emotion or to the meaning of that intensity, we're going to go to that emotion or to that intensity for ourselves and look and experience it directly to see what is really there. I know what I've been referring to conceptually as the symbol for what is really there, but that symbol makes it challenging for me to move through that emotion or move through that intensity. So rather than referring to that symbol, that concept of what that emotion or intensity means, we're going to look and experience it directly. Now, in order to make this real applicable and applied to our life, for a moment, let's think about a challenging situation in our life that that sometimes is hard for us to move past. Within the context of what we're exploring here today, it can be helpful if it's, like we've been saying, an emotion or something intense. So let's think of something that is intense for us, and sometimes we find ourselves walking away from a situation or getting mad and not being able to listen to the other side, or being so offended that we just shut down rather than fight, flight, or freeze. It could also just be within our own experience. Anytime the subject matter in our own thinking comes up, we tend to replay the same ideas about what comes up because we haven't been thinking of it in other ways. So those are the same thoughts that keep coming up. And we haven't been thinking of it in other ways because, well, we don't like what that feeling is. So whatever the subject matter, whether it's when you're alone or with someone else, think of any emotional or intense situation or subject matter. Not for the purpose of thinking about it the whole time, but just as we explore our emotions and our feelings in the way that we will through this meditation, just occasionally, as you gain some insight into something, you can recall that emotional or intense situation and compare it to what you're noticing or realizing within our meditation exploration. So we'll just kind of refer to that challenging memory or emotion or situation just occasionally, or maybe even only at the end. Okay. So if we have something in mind, let's go ahead and forget about it. And if you guys are ready, we will begin our meditation. All right. So keep your microphones muted. You might want to mute your phone if it's not already muted for your sake. And feel free to keep your eyes open or close them with me. All right. Now, the wonderful thing about meditation is there's not really anything to do. There's certainly not a place to get to called meditation. If we effort to this place called meditation, toward this place called meditation, we'll find ourselves just thinking a lot. Again, meditation is not some place that we get to in the traditional way we tend to get to something, create something, experience something different. In fact, meditation is the cessation of that very efforting, of that very creating, of that very movement towards a different place or state. Meditation itself is simply the noticing of the place or state that we are already in. is so simple. Our goal, in the traditional way we would have a goal, isn't to will meditation. Isn't to will a different state of mind. Which can be so challenging for people because they meditate. We meditate in order to relax, in order to drop deeper. But if we desire this relaxation or this depth too much, it is literally what keeps us from it. The efforting or willing to get to a more relaxed state is what keeps us from being able to relax or drop in more deeply. So sometimes for some of us at certain times, it could theoretically be helpful to try to learn how to accept our present conditions, our present feeling, our present state. So that way we can let go of trying to change it. A different perspective or frame of mind. As a kind of first step to actually letting go. But if we're not careful, this reframing or different perspective or just approaches to create a sense of acceptance can create more busyness than anything. But it can be helpful at times. However, the direct path to meditation, rather than reframing, is simply noticing. But when we notice, we usually notice in a subject-object relationship. There is myself, which notices something I need to accept in order to calm or drop in more deeply. Sometimes we can get hung up at this stage when we find ourselves in subject-object relationship. Myself and something else that's preventing me from calming or dropping in more deeply. So when we say noticing, we have to be careful that we don't notice with the mind or with thought. Noticing with the mind is noticing in a subject-object relationship. So you may find yourself still in slight resistance to that which you're trying to accept. So rather than noticing with thought or the mind, same thing. Which noticing with the thought or the mind in subject-object relationship always implies a certain level of resistance, a certain level of unacceptability. Because if we were to truly accept what we're noticing, there wouldn't be any need to define it. There wouldn't be, and as such, keep it slightly separate. Me and the thing. When we're truly comfortable, when we've truly accepted something, when we become so comfortable, we are feeling it directly. We no longer know ourselves as something other than it. So when we say noticing, meditation is noticing. It's not noticing with the mind. In a subject-object relationship, where you've separated yourself from what you notice. Separated yourself as this separate subject in which notices something. But a kind of noticing that's only made up of awareness, only made up of noticing. Not the noticing of something, but just the act of noticing itself. Just the act of being aware itself. Not being aware of something else or other than you, but just that which is aware. That which does the noticing. The very nature of the mind is duality. To know anything in duality is to not know the thing directly, but to know it indirectly or conceptually. So if we really want to know a frightening emotion or an intense feeling in the body, if we are really going to make decisions and actions based on what those feelings are telling us, then we ought to really know and to really investigate those feelings directly. We ought to go directly to them and see and feel what is really there, rather than referring to the indirect knowledge of the dualistic conceptual mind. What are these feelings? So, in this moment, let's go to whatever it is that's felt. This might not be an intense emotion. It might be as simple as a sensation. Or some subtle, lingering feeling. Whatever the case may be, it's the same approach. It's the new action, you could say, we're wanting to experiment with here is the same action, whether it's an intense emotion, a subtle, lingering feeling, or a sensation of the body. And maybe we might even feel a sense of hunger. Or maybe we even might feel some tension in the body. Or a need to move or stretch. Not that using any of our normal responses to these feelings or sensations is bad or wrong. But we could look at them as a place to experiment, rather than referring to our traditional patternings of what to do when we feel the sensation of hunger, the sensation of pain or tension, or the need to stretch or pop the back. Let's go to that direct experience for ourselves. What is really in the sensation of hunger? What is really there? And be careful not to refer to images such as the stomach, as this is yet again of the mind, adding to our direct experience of the sensation of hunger. We want to be careful when we go directly to an experience, careful to watch what thought or the mind is attempting to add to that direct sensation, that direct experience. Not that what thought or the mind is offering is bad, wrong, or even incorrect, but we're just wanting to see what thought or the mind contributes to the direct experience, and as such creates the way we experience hunger, or creates the way that we experience tension. We just want to see the way these two things come together. One thing being direct experience, emotions, sensations, tension, etc. And the other thing being our concepts we've created about these things that over the years have become automatic, habitual even. And as such, when these two things meet, it's like a spark meeting gasoline. One thing leads to the next. But what we're trying to do is just for a moment hold the spark away from the gasoline and look at the essence of these things directly. So whatever it is that we feel, whatever sensation we have, whatever intense emotion that either is there present or has been there at times, without referring to that indirect knowledge of the conceptual mind. Let's go to that feeling or sensation directly. What is really there in a frightening emotion? What is really frightening about that emotion? What is it in the emotion that's so unpassable? What is it in the emotion that is so unpassable? Again, without referring to the indirect knowledge that thought or the mind provides to us based on conditioning and habits from the past. What is really there? What is an emotion? And we're not really necessarily looking for an answer. We say, what is an emotion? To guide us closer to it. To where we no longer know ourselves as something separate from that emotion, but we have went so close that there's nothing left to resist. We have to be brave. And we have to be vigilant with being aware of what thought or the mind might tend to slip in there and tell you about that intense emotion or sensation. We have to be strong and courageous and vigilantly aware of what thought might attempt to slip in there and tell you what an emotion is. But rather than referring to the indirect knowledge that thought or the mind provides, and let's go there ourselves. Let's bring ourself to that emotion. And remember, not a self that knows itself as something separate than the emotion, or separate from the emotion, but rather a self that is so open it cannot distinguish itself as something separate from the emotion. It itself indeed is the emotion, but it would never call itself an emotion, because that would be the labeling conceptual mind slipping in there again. What do we see when we go directly to an emotion? Do we find that without referring to the indirect knowledge that a thought provides, that there's nothing actually there that's frightening at all? Is it possible to say that if we move fully into an emotion, into direct experience, that there isn't anything there at all? That what we referred to as an emotion previously actually dissolves into nothing. And this doesn't go to say that the next time a frightening emotion arises in a real-life situation, that it will no longer be there and it will immediately dissolve. It doesn't mean that. But if we can witness for ourselves the way in which these frightening emotions are not absolute, then we may find just a little bit more breathing room if and when the next time they arise. We may find just a little bit more flexibility in our thinking if and when the next time these emotions arise. It's slowly changing a belief. The belief that the water that I see in that mirage over there is really water. And I know that can be challenging to hear for all of us in our own areas where we strongly believe what we see is what is. And it's not that we're trying to suppress or deny what we see, or the water being real in the mirage, but rather to understand the way in which it might not be as absolute as we previously thought. That's all we're looking for. The way in which what we previously thought might not be as absolute. And this is a personal investigation. This doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about this. We know how rigid some of those areas are for us in our own lives. How absolute those areas of our life seem. And we're simply trying to change the belief that what we see is absolutely true. And as such, unpassable. And we slowly change this belief by this simple witnessing. The witnessing of the way things come together to create the experience we're living. And the two things that come together is the emotion and the thought about the emotion. The indirect knowledge of a thought and the direct knowledge of an emotion. When those two things come together unchecked, we live the absoluteness of what we see. That water in the mirage seems absolutely true. And that is most easily seen by looking not at a memory to dissect, but our direct experience now. If we look at the sensation of our body now and notice the way thought attempts give you the indirect knowledge about it, then it is that simple witnessing that we can impose upon those challenging memories with intense emotions. If we can look at our direct experience now, the simple sensation of the body, and witness the way thought attempts to slide in the indirect knowledge it knows from the past, then we can witness the way those two things create our experience of what we call ourself. And if this is true in the present, then this is true in every moment, despite the intensity of the sensation. These two things constantly blur together: direct experience and the indirect knowledge of a thought. They constantly blur together, like a spark to gasoline. The blurring of together creates a continual chain reaction of events. And we're wanting to just witness ourselves holding these two aspects, direct experience and the indirect knowledge of a thought, apart, just for a moment, to see the way in which we create our own experience, to become empowered. And how, in fact, the real safety we're looking for is in the complete merging with what previously seemed like a terrifying emotion. For it's only when we separate ourselves from the emotion that even creates the possibility for the idea of terror. is only in the labeling of the emotion that creates the possibility for the idea of terror. And again, we're just wanting to witness this. And watch what our mind does with this. It may naturally start to rewire certain things. Maybe it won't be hugely dramatic at first. Or maybe it will. Whichever the case may be, take a moment to see and collect any thoughts that would be helpful to take with you. Any suggestions your mind gives to you that might help with the rewiring. And when you're ready, and you have collected any thoughts that would be helpful to make more conscious, feel free to begin to bring your attention back to your physical body, so to speak, your thoughts, each other, and the conversation. And when you're ready, and only when you're ready, feel free to very slowly take a deep breath in and open your eyes. I think one of the most important parts about these types of meditations is watching what our own mind does with the information presented. To say that slightly differently, watching what ideas and images about the concepts, or even just about our own life experiences that are presented to us from our subconscious mind in the meditations. Just thinking about our memories and our experiences in light of what we talk about in the meditation. Whether I think we're totally conscious of what the meditation was, the memories and images that our mind presents to us is probably from what the theme of the meditation was. The subconscious mind is hearing those words. So therefore, if anyone wants to share what their personal experience was in the meditation, or whatever your takeaway was, or whatever your mind presented to you, whatever you saw, or whatever you witnessed, what your own personal, very personal journey was, whether you feel it was related to the meditation or not. We would love to hear. I think we all grow from that.